Hello, and welcome to the Weekly Scroll podcast. My name is Ryan.
And I'm a giant cicada with the face of an old man.
And I'm Watt.
And today, obviously, we are talking about Cloud Empress. Watt has been on the show before. It's great to have you back. Thank you so much.
Great to be back. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Cloud Empress, it's in people's hands now. How does that feel?
It's really exciting. I didn't fully realize how much stuff was going to be packed together. Obviously, I made mock-ups and I committed to doing certain things, but I hand-assembled most of the games, or all of them. So putting them together and kind of making this little bundle, it felt really exciting. And just to see it all sort of spread out on the table and in people's social media posts and all that kind of stuff has been really exciting and gratifying and just kind of a dream come true. Yeah.
Yeah, the project turned out, really incredibly impressive. It is a really good amount of I'm still pulling stuff out of stuff. And it looks beautiful. It really is very beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One of the original sort of concepts for the first Kickstarter, as I was envisioning it, was really trying to outdo myself on the first campaign, at least. And really, it's hard to say that you have an expansive world without having an expansive product, at least at first. And so this was sort of it. I felt like I had to go big with the first Kickstarter campaign and the first set of materials because I wanted to evoke a larger setting, not just sort of a set of locations, but an entire world in a single crowdfunding campaign, which certainly was a challenge. But I think the multiple materials and the hex crawl and just sort of the allusions to other larger world elements, I think made me at least feel successful in that regard.
Yeah, I think absolutely. It was done fantastically. And we kind of just jumped in here. For those listening who might not know, would you mind telling us what Cloud Empress is?
Sure. So Cloud Empress is a ecological science fantasy RPG setting for Mothership 1E, the science fiction horror RPG. And it's heavily inspired by some of the key touch points and genre touch points are Nausicaa in the Valley of the Wind by Hayao Miyazaki, Full Metal Alchemist, and Dune. So those are sort of the three largest influences, although there's quite a few others in there as well. But those are sort of the touch points and some of the genre tropes I tried to pull on to ground players in some kind of reality that they would understand. So it's far in the future of our society, or even maybe where Mothership is at. But it also carries these sort of ecological overtones and really ideally like a thoughtfulness around the ecosystems at play in this space, and really trying to ground the players in a world that doesn't necessarily really care about them. And you're sort of surviving and adventuring and moving through a world that has its own rules that aren't necessarily governed by, I guess I should say they're governed by giant magical cicadas. So that's the other sort of big draw, where Nausicaa has this sort of giant and Dune has these sandworms. I tried to draw on some of my Midwestern heritage and the 17-year cicadas that we experience and different cicada broods. And so these are some giant cicadas with these sort of unnerving stone human faces on their chitin armor, which are kind of a mystery in the setting.
And also a little creepy.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Yeah, and then kind of speaking about the bundle, because I forgot already, we're doing a giveaway tonight. So Watt was kind enough to send us an entire extra deluxe bundle edition, and that includes all the bits and pieces, which we were talking about this a little bit more on stream, but like the elevation of like the whole set with like the art cards, the bingo card, the player handouts to kind of do the GM screen, and even this, like the thank you card, is just such a nice touch. That was wonderful. But we'll be giving away one of these entire things to somebody in chat. So let me actually turn that on.
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck, Ozo.
Yeah. There you go. And all you have to do is hit !cloud to be entered if you're a sub. I fixed it this time, so you'll actually get 2, or you should, I hope, entries, and then we'll draw it at the end. I was going to say continental United States only, but we'll see about the cost of shipping. But we'll kind of take it from there. So feel free to hit !cloud, and then we'll keep going here. So I think we talked about this before on stream, like for this episode to really kind of like do like a how the sausage is made episode, as far as like, you know, Cloud Empress when it started to here. So I guess my first question is, well, I guess this is like the 5th one by now. When did you actually start working on Cloud Empress as like a setting, as a world that you want to do separate? Because I know you've put out Mothership, like other Mothership stuff, but when did you say, all right, I want to make my own thing, and then start going from there?
The original gestation of Cloud Empress started right around midpoint of my last crowdfunding campaign, Hot Stuff on Shore Leave, which is a shore leave module that's meant to be played by players sort of away from their group in a Mothership campaign, where you sort of explore hot stuff and hookups on this polluted island that has these beautiful sunsets that are all from the hot sauce burning people's eyes and the sky. But the concept came from this idea of making a World War II inspired Mothership setting. I think for me, World War II weaponry is fairly culturally evocative, but I think it also engages in this area of play that I think is particularly interesting, where you can express the brutality of war and of gun violence, but it's not, there's still some gamification that can happen and some actual play that can happen. Whereas I think for me personally, modern weaponry is just so powerful and horrible that and I know you all have strong opinions on guns in role-playing games, right? But at least in what kind of play experiences they make. But I mean, drone bombing is, there's just not a lot of fun, and I'm not saying gun violence is fun by any means, and a lot of Cloud Empress sort of directly engages with the topic. But there's still some space for play, I think, around ranged weaponry that I wanted to explore. And also, I was listening to the Revolutions podcast on the Russian Revolution and all sorts of stuff. So that there's some sort of like Russian Revolution overtones and stuff like that. So the original title that sort of got me excited was Mother Loaf. It was this sort of idea about like bread and mothership and trying to bring it into a World War II technology, 1940s, 1950s technology setting, and sort of started to explore that idea. Wasn't entirely sure if it was going to be a historical setting or just one planet that had sort of maybe become a backwater or sort of trapped, people trapped in this sort of setting. Started to explore that, but one of the things that I'm really keen on, I think about the games I design on and the books that I make really from an artistic standpoint, but also from a product design standpoint. And so assessing what the visual impact of a book is going to be is very important to me. One of the big things that I try to do with the books I make, I try to go for unique. I think that's one of the things that I most love about Mothership as a setting. It's a really unique looking book. It's sort of, and I think you all have talked about, sort of shed some of the polish that other RPGs might have for uniqueness. And I think it really creates something that's really exciting to me. Whereas some of the loose oil painting kind of concept art look that you see in a lot of role-playing games, I mean, certainly can be done really well, but it's hard to distinguish one book from another at a certain point. So I can say this piece is amazing, it looks great, but I'm not really sure what book it's from. And so that's one of the strong components of the designs I work on. I try to have every single piece of art one, be immediately identifiable as the setting, and two, really try to encapsulate most of the setting's complexities and dynamics in it. So one of the things with the art pieces, usually there's some sort of ecological component as well as some fantasy element as well as some technology in there. So just this sort of combination of different things to really sell, hey, this is every piece of art and the art direction really pointing to this larger world. So found an art team named 𝗖𝗟𝗢𝗨𝗗, who Pibita and Garen are the two artists, and started working with them and helping develop this visual language. And so we took it more in a fantasy direction and a farther future direction, more of the science fiction element. Along the way, which turned out to be a blessing in disguise, Tuesday Night Games made a rule that you can't have Mother in your title for a third-party supplement for a number of reasons. A lot of people were starting to do it, and I wasn't. There were 2 or 3 already sort of proposed, and so I had to switch the name, which I thought was horrible because I'd already gotten like 300 Twitter followers, and people were liking my stuff already, and but it ended up being really good, and I did some audience engagement around some different name titles and settled on Cloud Empress, and that actually was Cloud, the character, is both on the cover, but then ended up becoming a major figure in both the setting and as well as the setting book. And so that was something that really evolved out of the title itself, which I was really happy about. And so that was all in June 2022, maybe May 2022, somewhere around there, and then started gearing up for a January crowdfunding campaign.
Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
and the campaign did okay. What did it almost hit
Yeah, it did fine.
$100,000, you know?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It was like 98K. So
Yeah.
how both like exciting and daunting was it to have like 2,000 plus backers on your first Kickstarter?
It was mostly just exciting. One of the things, I have some project management experience in my work life, and with crowdfunding campaigns, as people will tell you, you're managing risk all over the place, and the 2 ways that you can do that are, one, front loading risk, so putting a lot of your own resources into a campaign and completing a lot of the game ahead of time. So the obvious risk then is that if the campaign's not successful, you won't make that money back, or you might not have a successful project. Or you can put the risk on the tail end where you have a great idea and maybe a limited amount of art assets, limited amount of game design, so you haven't put a lot of investment on the front end, and then you're sort of taking that risk on the project management back end, where you're sort of putting the game together and those kinds of things. So I tried to do a lot of work on the front end with the graphic design, with the art, with those kinds of things ahead of time. So there was a lot of my previous campaign, Hot Stuff on Shore Leave, it did maybe $1,500, something like that. So I learned a lot from that campaign around fulfillment, around pricing, around building a package that I think would excite people, and really thought about Cloud Empress as a much different type of campaign, but a lot of the fundamentals stayed the same. So it was really surprising. It felt very validating because I sold a bass guitar that was sort of, I was selling stuff to pay for art, those kinds of things. Didn't mortgage the house or anything like that. That's not my style. I didn't take out a bunch of credit card debt. Sometimes you hear creators do that, and that just seems like a horrible idea to me. Sometimes it works out for folks. I mean, people are probably looking at me for a life lesson around this stuff, but I did what was within reason, within my budget. But I did stretch things a bit with this idea of benchmarking. I did a lot of benchmarking around comparable campaigns and within the Mothership ecosystem. So I thought it would be much more successful than my previous campaign, but no idea it was going to be so successful. And then there were certain things, as you mentioned, the daunting aspect was early around fulfillment. The quotes that I gave were around me fulfilling everything. So that was the horror of the campaign for a long time, was just how many books are showing up at my house, and how the heck am I going to get them all in the house and not, like, will they fit? Can I get them
Yeah, I mean,
downstairs?
there's a lot of books.
Can I get them out of the house? And the other thing too is, so we had about 1,800 backers that did physical pledges, but that's 8 books and a number of postcards. So, multiply that. And then I tried to do, I think, 30 to 40% extra. So that's sort of the size. So it ended up being, I think, like 8 or 9 pallets. And I hired some movers to help me move them down and got them all out. For some kind of grueling physical labor on my end. But that was the big scare for me was, how do I do this? The fulfillment side of things. And also I didn't want to, the project was not priced at having a fulfillment company do a lot of the fulfillment. And so that was something I didn't want to change up, because I thought there would be some disappointment and I don't know. I don't know I don't know how backers would have if I doubled the shipping fees. I ended up having to increase them based on the quantity and volume and things like that, and also just the size of the product increased through development quite a bit, the weight and all those things. But I didn't want to drastically change sort of shipping estimates as much as possible, and so I was sort of committed to doing it myself, which ended up working out. I think not something I plan on doing again.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I didn't feel like I waited forever for this. Like when did the campaign actually finish?
So the campaign finished February 7th, maybe something like that. There's sort of an optimistic fulfillment date out there. The more realistic or conservative one was October. And so most backers received their pledges in November. We have a couple, I think maybe 50 to 60 Canadian backers that are still getting them out too, just with some delays in holiday shipping. That was one of the big things I wanted to do, was ideally avoid some of the surcharges and just chaos of holiday shipping. We didn't totally do that, but yeah, so it ended up being, I don't know, February to October for most folks, early November for most folks, which I was pretty happy with.
Yeah, realistically for a Kickstarter, that's a pretty quick, solid turnaround. So especially if you're hand packaging everything, I can't believe that actually is just how long it took, and that you hand sent out like 1,800 packages. That's crazy. Yeah.
I think I think a lot about both I have to wear a lot of hats being sort of single creator publisher. And one of the things I think about with my publishing hat is what kind of experience do folks get in the crowdfunding campaign? And so that's been something, I don't know if I hope folks have as pleasant an experience in the crowdfunding campaign as they do with the product after. I mean, ideally the product's a little better than, just shopping. Hopefully you get some fulfillment out of it beyond, but I've certainly backed a number of crowdfunding campaigns, and it's turns really dark and really stressful and feels like people are lying to you, and it creates this really toxic relationship. Sometimes it feels like it, and there's a lot to be said about the crowdfunding dynamics and all those sorts of things, and the systems at play and why those dynamics happen. But it can really diminish, I think, my engagement with a piece of media or a game I get or something like that if I've had sort of a negative perception of the creator through the crowdfunding campaign. And so that's something I'm really big on, is that customer service experience, and try to be really honest and keep my word around things, but also be really realistic and use sort of that project management lens around getting out ahead of risks and really helping folks see the decisions I'm making, why those decisions are coming, and ultimately letting people off the boat with, we really haven't had a lot of people ask for refunds or drop, but that's always an option too if the changes don't sort of align with someone's vision for the product that we're making.
That's a very like collected, holistic like view on this whole process. That's so like incredibly well-rounded, and like it's interesting to hear a creator talk about like, oh yeah, the experience of somebody backing this and how they feel about the project past just getting the thing. Like I think very highly of you for that, because I've had a lot of negative, I think Ball had negative experiences with Kickstarter where it's just like, oh man, I feel different about this after having to deal with the person creating this. And Yeah.
And one of my largest concerns right now, we're seeing this proliferation of multiple crowdfunding platforms, and Kickstarter right now is I think still raising the sort of largest amount of revenue, especially for smaller projects. But I'm interested to see how those negative experiences coalesce around the brand of Kickstarter. I'm starting to see more and more people say, I don't back Kickstarters anymore. So does that mean crowdfunding? Does that mean other platforms? I'm just really not sure. I seem to see like folks make exceptions even when they say that around track record and trust and what they see in a campaign and what they can maybe touch and feel and identify ahead of the campaign to make sure something's not like vaporware or something's not, totally unfinished. But it's things change so quickly. I mean, I would have never thought, we don't need to go into it, but I spent so much time building this Twitter brand, and I was so excited, and I got like 1,000 Twitter followers out of like, I went from 0 to 1,000 in like 6 to 8 months because the amount of effort and time I had put into it, and that just sort of all totally evaporated for a number of reasons. And so you just really can't predict these things. But I try to keep my eye on trends and really think about, again, that human experience folks have. Because one of the things I've watched some videos on, and I'm kind of into marketing weirdly. But one of the things I've heard folks talk about is if you're an artist, but you're also a salesperson. In our digital environment, we do a lot of sales, right? So how do we create a sales experience that doesn't leave a bad taste in your mouth throughout the entire process? And how do I create a sales funnel, right? How do I get people who just hear the name Cloud Empress into a place where they can make a determination whether it's a game they think they'll enjoy, whether that's playing it or reading it. So that's just a lot of what I think about it, and not doing that out of a way of like helping people make an informed decision is what I really try to do. And a lot of that too is like the rule book's free, that I plan on keeping that free for a long time, just to help people, like, you can look at what you're going to get, and really sort of see what the game's about before you have to make a financial decision. Because I know there's a lot of games competing for people's interests, and also, I mean, money's tight, and games bring a lot of joy to people's lives, and we have to make sort of finite decisions about what we purchase. I will say one last thing though. I am a little maybe I do get a little worried about this idea though of like being a consumer as our primary mode of engaging with art. And particularly around reviewers that sort of speak as consumer advocates. I find that very, very unnerving at times. And I really think about a lot of the work I do from like an art first standpoint, and using the commercial vehicles of our economy to sort of get art to people that are interested in it, whose lives might be impacted or changed by it. So I do try to be careful about this like consumer first idea. More like a people first, I don't know, kind of thing. But the word consumer has a lot of connotations, along with like content and content creator and all these other things. So
yeah,
it's a lot.
I mean,
some of the stuff
if you really
I think
about it, it's a slippery slope to Cloud Empress from here. You know what I mean? This is where it starts. But a lot of what you said, to not dig too deep into some things, but regardless of like as part of like the consumer experience, because like I consume things, it's a thing that happens, but I will say that like especially with as far as crowdfunding and stuff goes, to me, what I've always found the most important and what I really appreciate about the way that you've handled yourself through this entire process is just I don't even want to say like personable. Like, you've been very upfront from the beginning. You laid out the expectations from the beginning. As we said, that you turned a project around that's this beautiful in what would we say, like 8-9 months, and there's still, I think, what are there, like 23 updates on the Kickstarter in that period of time. That to me is what I find most important. Is I will wait, and there's still projects I'm waiting 4 years on that I'm not mad about, because I've been updated through the entire process. There's been explanation, a little bit of like the sausage is made kind of thing. And one thing that I really appreciate about how it seems the way that you like project manage this entire thing is it about what you talked about. Like, you want people to enjoy the game, enjoy the experience. The book is free. Like, there's all these little things all the way through where it's like very clearly not necessarily like for the consumer, as in I paid money for this so I want it, but for the person that wants to appreciate the art that you made with this, and the thing that's actually produced in their hands, that mean a lot. And that there's a lot of ways where little things can ding a thing, you know what I mean? Like one thing here, one thing here, and then at the end you might have a bad experience. And for me, as far as Cloud Empress is concerned, like I felt like I had the opposite experience with that, where like every time I got an update, or like when I was talking to, I talked to Christian a lot, they've been on the show, the first time I heard that like the book is just going to be free for a long time, things like that, I'm just like, every time I heard about Cloud Empress, it was always a positive experience. And I don't really think like at any point was I like, yeah, but they could have done that differently. Like, and that's what I think is really fantastic. Yeah.
Well, I mean, even the other.
No, go for it.
Well, the other thing that comes to mind, and I appreciate you saying all that, because those are all kind of micro decisions I've been trying to make. There's more and more research about trust, which I think is interesting. The research I've seen around trust breaks down into competence and integrity, or competence and values. And what the stuff I've read about it from researchers is that trust can be rebuilt, but there's also, it's really difficult to regain trust when you feel like someone's integrity is compromised, or their values are compromised, or are strongly different than your own. People can show that they have competence by doing better, by fixing things. But I think a lot of the time where there's that breakdown is when someone is dishonest, and there's a lot of pressure, I feel, when I'm writing these updates to paint a good picture. I want people to think that things are going well. And I also think there's a turning point. I don't know if this is the conversation you all intended to have, but I think there's this sort of like winners losers mentality that we have. I don't know if that's societal. I don't know if it's some kind of like, I get really cautious about anything being biological, but a lot of what crowdfunding is about is this idea of like, this is a winner. You're participating in a winner. And then a lot of that comes down to what the first day looks like, the momentum of the campaign over time. But a crowd can really turn on a campaign, and it becomes this like really negative, cathartic thing where people just, and it's a guilty pleasure sometimes for me to read them. But I know it could just as easily be me, and sometimes it's not up to the creator why that thing turns. But people, and then you see the whole psychological thing of like, come on, I know they can do it. If you're reading this, I believe in you. And people going through these like stages of grief over the $500 they put into this miniatures game that they're never going to see, and this Ponzi scheme, right? So it's such a psychologically interesting thing. But a lot of what I learned was from Jamie Stigmeyer around, he's put out a ton of tremendous free resources around. One of the things, just for an example, I've probably said it a couple times, but he's like, if you're just a single person, just talk from your own perspective. Don't be like, we're the corporation that's making this game. If it's just you, just say it's you, right? And so that's something I try to do. It's like, it's just me most of the time. Like, we have a team of people that put together certain things, but a lot of times it's just me. And so just being open and honest about that, with the trust that it's not going to scare someone, in that it's not this like huge production team that's never going to make a mistake, but instead going for this more realistic, trust-based approach. And really, I think comfort to me is the more authentic you are with boundaries, with healthy boundaries, the more you could filter out who will be who someone might enjoy your work. And also, like, there are customers I don't want to deal with, right? Like, there are people that have expectations I can't meet, primarily, or demands that I think are unhealthy that I don't want to engage with, right? And so I can help set the context and the expectations for folks, and other people can meet them, right? So I think one of the things I tried to make Cloud Empress big and polished, but like, I didn't go with the hardcover rule book and all those kinds of things because I wasn't sure I could ship that and make it without it getting all bent up, right? So I don't know. I don't really know how to do that at this point. Maybe later I will, but just an example of like setting some of those expectations. Yeah.
I think it's funny how much of that whole thing was like, yeah, this is just being an artist and being a human dealing with like the expectations and this like ingrained thought process of capitalism. Like the winner loser thing is like total social Darwinism, like capitalist bullshit but I do think that you're right when you come out as like, hey, I'm a person doing this. And like, if I make mistakes, like I am trying not to, but I am a singular human. It makes you so much more relatable. Like, I think that's so true. And I think you obviously have seen a lot of success like in taking that approach. And I've seen other people who have had less success because they were like, oh, this our little company. I'm like, it's you and one other dude, you know?
Yeah. It makes a big difference. I just don't understand. I mean, especially with like modern kind of views on companies and stuff in general, because like, I mean, we're eat the rich people here. So like, I just don't see a reason to an extent to try to put this like almost barrier of branding between. It's like, why make yourself faceless? Because we are human beings. We see faces in the backs of cars. Like we want, like we personify people. So it is really nice to be able to see the person doing it. But in some of the stuff you're talking about with crowdfunding, like as someone who's backed way too many projects, I've always found the thing that got me less interested in a project over time is like, I think obviously, you know, everyone needs to set boundaries for what they can do on Kickstarter. For me, I think what immediately turns my head is when like someone sets a boundary and then fails at their like to meet where they've set that boundary as well. So if you say like, I'm going to do a monthly update and then 6 months passes by, I can tell you like that. I can tell you right now that in 6 months, we're going to hear that some terrible life event happened and you're 6 months behind and like all this other stuff. And it's just like, I'm happy to get, hey, nothing happened, but I'm still alive updates every month if they said they were going to do it every month, than to hear nothing for 6 months and then be like, well, I didn't have anything to say. So I think the setting the boundaries and then like meeting those expectations for the backers, at least from someone who's backed a ton, is incredibly important in crowdfunding. And as I said, like you seem to have met like all of those. Like if I forget that I backed a project and I'm not worried about it, to me that feels good, where I'm like, oh, it's been 6 months, didn't even realize, like we're good. I heard something about it last month, it's fine, you know.
And there's to speak it to that too, I've done that on occasion, mostly with internal development goals. With you feel the pressure and things have to change, or I need to get on track, so I'm going to set this goal that I think I can do. And maybe it's optimistic, but there's all this research about how bad we are at setting goals. And one of the things I've started to do is I have like a Kanban board, like a Post-it board, but I put the expected time on one side, and once it's done, I write how many hours it takes. So this is an adventure I'm writing for Cloud Empress. So I have 6 hours. So I'm probably at like 8 right now, but I try to just do this so I can check my own headspace around, how am I doing with estimating things? Because it's so easy to say, okay, I was in a bad place, or things weren't going well before, but now they're going to change. And it doesn't work that way. Normally but it's so easy to feel the pressure of an audience or an editor or a team that's waiting for something,
or a Discord server,
whomever, because folks are excited and folks want to see your work and folks want to have it in their hands. And I will say too, I have seen just a tremendous amount of like patience and understanding, and I had to pull out. I drastically underestimated how big these books were going to be. So how that what happened then was like, oh, like I couldn't fit the introductory adventure in the book. Like these are 60 pages is the most I can get in a. I engage with backers or audience members, and they said, "Oh, we really want staple bound." So that took Perfect Bound off the table because people said we want it to be flat. We want it to be a book that we can kind of throw around. So that was sort of a constraint on the project, but then it became, well, we can only print 60 pages, and 60 pages is pretty big. I do like 50 pages might have folded flatter a little bit, but then it became, oh, like, what do I do with this intro adventure? Or, I couldn't fit the pamphlets. The pamphlets were just not going to fit with the commissions I had for, so yeah, expanding those kinds of things. Not sure why I brought that up at this point, but just talking about how those scope things can change. Maybe I don't know.
It's very Mothershipy for you to have so many zines, though. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
this is the most Mothershipy thing ever. It's like
this entire shelf, except for maybe like these two books, is just Mothership zines. So like, it's definitely a zine thing to have Mothership. But it's really clear though that you do have project management experience, and I think that's where a lot of people tend to suffer as well. There's people out there that make great stuff, and then I'm never going to back it again because their product management on their crowdfunding was just abysmal. And it sucks, but when you've lost someone, you've lost someone. But again, it seems like every step of the way, like you're talking about like sourcing out, like, do I do Perfect Bound, or like there's this thought all the way through where it's just like, what do people want? What's the best thing that I can give? And still like have my vision come through. That just seems, like I said, it's really important to a project, and it's very evident once you get this. And it's interesting too to hear like why it is interesting, like why the intro adventure is not in the first one, and why it's staple bound, and why there's like 6 pamphlets, and why it's not a hardback book and stuff like that. Those are really awesome things to hear, and I'm sure like people that are creating Kickstarters in the future, it's just like sometimes you have to like, these are the things that happen because these are the way that, as the things are presented to me, that they're best possible options, versus being like, no, I have to do this thing and there's no compromise. And I think that can bury people too. So it's really nice to hear and see that it is a fantastic project and it looks great, and to hear the reasons why it turned out the way it did is really cool.
The other thing I don't, probably nobody knows this, but one of the other, well, I talked to Sean McCoy a little bit about this, and one of the advice he gave me was, I wanted to make this as equitable a project I could, with not fully understanding what the costs were going to be. So the adventure writers in particular are getting a per copy royalty on the which isn't uncommon. I'm not like bragging about that or anything like that. But he was sort of talking like, when you do that, you're maybe committing the next 20 years of your life to be engaged with that person, right? And so one of the things that I want to make projects that are equitable, that support the creators that put their artistry into them, and support diverse creators, their livelihoods, all those kinds of things. But one of the things that was really intentional about this is like, I won't even say but if one of these people, like something really bad, they do something really bad, like we can pull that book and continue to sell these books, right? Or we don't have to, like, one of the things we talked about with trust, right, is like, if somebody does something really bad and they're like 12 pages in here, like, how do people feel about that work? And so that's something I really think about in I've been a part of a lot of communities that have self-destructed from some really toxic behavior. And I've come to believe that you can do your best. And I have like a value statement. We try to talk about the values of a company. I'm working with, like legally protecting myself from the impacts other people can have. But ultimately, that's like another place where trust really comes out, is the people you collaborate with. And so building financial security into those relationships while also trying to create equity is something that's really challenging. And I think not something a lot of folks approach community and partnerships with this, like, well, of course things are going to go well. We're both great people, right? And maybe that's like just me being a low trust person, but I've just seen so many really horrible stuff, or somebody having royalties on a piece of work that then it's like, it just feels icky for everyone. Everyone loves the game, but it just feels really icky to sell it anymore. And I don't know. That's sort of a tangent, and maybe, but I think it's important for me that I stand by the folks that work on the games, and that I support them financially. Those are values of mine.
You know, even though you're like a massive corporation, I want you to know I think you're very humane. So
Yeah. So kind of shifting gears a little bit, still talking about the Kickstarter though, did you, aside from the things that we did talk about, did you run into any big complications, or was your kind of like step-by-step product management able to keep most of that stuff, just to like maybe having to like switch gears but not really like hit a wall at all?
The two worst parts of the campaign, just stress-wise, were one, we lost a fulfillment partner in the UK pretty last minute, and things significantly changed with their fulfillment model. Like every month we were working together, and so that was a big scare for me. And unfortunately, we had promised this. I had promised this customs. Well, me and the fulfillment partner had promised like this customs-free experience for EU backers in particular, and their business model changed, and I don't necessarily, I mean, I'm not criticizing them for that. Like, they have to do what they have to do. I don't think they do fulfillment anymore, even because it's a really, their margins are so low on all this stuff. It totally makes sense. And all these kind of, again, the fulfillment partners, all these people are like, except for maybe some of the printers, and in particular, it's all one or two people doing all this stuff, in many cases. So that was a big scare, and I was really worried, and there is a financial and just consumer experience impact around. Customs free is so nice when you can do it for folks, that they get the thing and they don't have to pay a bunch of money. And from what I hear, like sometimes you have to go to the post office and sign these papers and all this kinds of stuff, and it's really just a scare. Like, I don't know how much this is going to cost. Nobody knows like what's going to happen. I don't know. So there's just a big scare. So that was a big thing that really freaked me out. And we ended up getting it to folks for a reasonable price with this customs edition. That was unfortunate. But I think I only had one backer that said that wasn't going to be financially viable, or not even that, but they just didn't want to participate in that kind of model. It was just not what they were looking for in the campaign, and got them the digital files, I think. So, or we'll get them the digital files on drive-through when they're out. The other piece was Cloud Empress was originally sort of designed to be a little bit more of, and I'm not like the most like a little bit more story gamey. So like the original hex crawl was going to be like 48 hexes or something like that, with the idea that they were going to be a lot more in each hex, and a lot more almost pre-scripted scenarios that would have characters, and there was a system of like tracking NPCs across the hexes. So NPCs in Bean Barge, like I would actually track where they were moving and what decisions they were making. And what I came to realize was that I was sort of playing my own game. I was taking these NPCs I really loved and taking them on adventures and offering that to the players, but through development editing, really realized that was sort of the fun of the Warden in particular. Like that's the fun where the Warden gets to express their creativity, and also that I didn't need to do it. I draw a lot of inspiration.
Very important when you're doing all this yourself. What do you not need to do, you know?
And it was just a ton of work, and it wasn't fun overhead for people to do. So I still tried to keep one of the ideas that I have that I think is cute is still having NPCs show up that you've met before, maybe. And that I think may turn some players off, in that it's, well, how do you know that NPC is alive still? But that's just sort of, I don't know, trusting the people there to put somebody else in, or just bring it back from the dead, cursed, or, you know, whatever. But that was the biggest thing, was really leaning more into OSR type old school sense of play, where versus something that was a little bit more situational and scripted and modeled more like scenes and situations rather than this larger minimalist at times hex map. So that was like a big change, and it scared me. And we ended up doing 2 development passes. Was sort of we went through 1 dev pass and realized certain things weren't where they needed to be, and some of the risks I were taking weren't paying off. I like taking risks. I like trying new stuff, but they just weren't. They were more work than they were, and they were coming out of a place of maybe taking some of the fun out of the Warden in particular. And so bringing that back in meant like a pretty major rewrite on the setting book in particular. Also, I guess the other piece too with the first development editing pass, I wanted to write, I felt like I obligated to write a lot of how to play RPG stuff, which I'm sure you all love.
Yeah.
Like, what is an RPG? And like, I had maybe I released all this stuff too. I'm a big fan of just like releasing work in progress materials, but I had like 2 or 3 pages on safety tools, and one of the things that I've realized is I run games, I play RPGs, but there are people that do it a lot more than I do, and also have a lot more experience and knowledge and insight. And then that stuff, I felt like I wasn't, when I got advice on, I wasn't really saying anything new or profound. And so trusting the players there's a lot of trust I try to give to the players in like Hunter, you talked about the magic being pretty wacky, like trusting players to have fun with magic and knowing where I can play with that trust. So one of the areas that I gave a little bit more trust around was not needing to write a ton about safety. I mentioned that safety is important in play, but I think Troika has one of the examples we used when writing the book was like Troika said something like, just go search the internet for it, right? It's like, it's there, you can look for it. And also sort of key to the work I do is really figuring out who this game is for. And I didn't imagine it was going to be for someone's like first RPG.
Right.
Maybe their second or third, or their friends first, but that somebody with some experience was probably guiding someone into this experience, and that they would be setting the tone for it.
Yeah,
that's such a funny thing, because we do often talk about that. It's like there will be these RPGs that are like fairly esoteric. Like, you're not finding this on your first time playing a game, or maybe your 5th time, and like, yeah, they'll have a whole how-to section. So
it's
yeah,
not necessary. Like all the time, my line is like, this is not your first game. Like, there's no way this is your first game. Like, it's very rare that this could be, and the person running it, it's definitely not theirs. So like, the need to have like, what is a TTRPG, and like even the safety tools thing. Obviously, we're big safety tools people, but I think even just like mentioning that it's a good idea to use them for most times is good enough, because I definitely think there was like a movement a little bit in TTRPGs where there's this like big like maybe like unawareness of them, or like not drive, and then like it became like such a big push that it's now just kind of an accepted part of the community that like everyone knows about it a little bit more. So there's weird things that sometimes happen where like something might not have been there, so there's a big push for it, and now for the most part, I think if you talk to most people in the scene, like they know what a safety tool is. It's not often, but if it we also did talk about that with like in Mouse Rider and stuff like that, like having what is a TTRPG thing in a game that might be someone's first game is a great thing to have. It's just like if you're the odds of some people's like super weird esoteric like found on the page 10 of some website game doesn't necessarily need 3 pages on it. So it's interesting that you made that the choice in the rulebook for you as well.
And the design philosophy then extends to the setting book. Like a lot of these hex descriptions, I don't know, I'll try to find, should I try to find one that's there? Some of them are kind of minimalist. There are a couple sentences for an entire hex. I'm not going to find it. 2 green farmerlings tag a concrete wall with a bucket of paint. 3 of their friends sit in the shade of the collapsed aqueduct watching, laughing, and flirting. So it's just a sentence, and I think if we set up this like how to play an RPG and all this like hand holding in the there's not a lot of hand holding for that, right? I mean, I think it's evocative, but it's going to take some creativity and experience to make that come alive and like fill in those details. Like there's not a list of who those NPCs are. There's no stats for those NPCs.
But this kind of circles back to trust, you know, like
Yeah.
this is you trusting your players, like your wardens, to like fill in the blanks. And I personally do not, if you make a hex crawl and every single hex is packed, I don't want to play it. I love a hex crawl that has like, yeah, like that. Like they're just tagging a wall and it's a bunch of dudes hanging out. It feels so lived in. Like this is what people do. Like they have nothing to do. It's midday. They're done for the day or whatever. They're taking a break. They're tagging a wall. Your party's gonna shoot the shit with them and maybe have an arm wrestling competition and you go on your way, you know?
But you know, I really love a lot of the way that you do hexes, and like my go-to example a lot of times is 𝗖𝗟𝗢𝗪 from Highland Paranormal, with the way that they write adventures, because they do a ton of micro dungeons, and I really like when a situation is put out there, and that's what you get. You know, I think my biggest knock personally to me, I'm not as mean on 5e as I used to be, but it's because every situation is like described, where like the way that I really enjoy hexes is, like you said, here are these people doing this thing, as opposed to here are these people doing this thing. If you do this, roll for that. If you do this, roll for that, because you're not even, it feels like not even so much that the GM is railroading the players, but that the module is railroading the GM to force these very specific situations. And that's just not the game I like to play, because like I play the game to see how the world happens and see how the players happen. So the way that you do a lot of the descriptions and the hexes like that are is really fantastic, because yeah, just give me the seed and let my players, you know, and I can plant it and let the players grow it, you know. And it's really nice to see a lot of the descriptions you did with the hexes.
The other thing that I think I just love about hex crawls, at least writing them, is, and I forget what your all opinions on this are, but I don't do like many adventure hooks on any of the locations, because it's a big hex map. It's like, just go somewhere else. Like if it's boring you, do something else, right? Like I think adventure hooks are more important, especially in Mothership, when you're going into it's like there's a lot of derelict ships. It's like, I'm not going to go in there. Like, so you need a hook to get in there. At least it feels like when I'm playing Mothership games. But with the hex crawl, it's like, just go somewhere else. Like, yeah. But to write this big, like, you know, some people say there's a treasure chest in the basement and and like an old man told you this, and that stuff, like, I don't know, works for some folks, but it's just something I let go of and made the world to me feel a little bit more organic. And also that it's like apples to apples, right? It's like all the jokes are written for you. So where does and I think that's something that's really interesting to me as someone who like originally came to RPGs to create worlds. Like that's kind of my publishing imprint is Worlds by Watt. Like I like making settings. I like world building. That's the thing that excites me. And I try to think that I would play Cloud Empress as someone that didn't design it, because I think there's still a lot of space for that world building and creativity. And I never try to fill in the bubble or the picture, because I think one of the big challenges I have, especially around world building, like I would never run a Lord of the Rings game ever, because I know one of my players is going to know more about Tolkien than I am.
Right. It's very static. You know?
And the people that are excited. So that just seems to be like this fundamental problem of like having to stay on script within these boundaries and having agreed upon universes. I am writing a lot of I do monthly expansions for Cloud Empress on my newsletter, and so a lot of the like world building stuff that people want to find out about, they can vote on, and then I write that stuff. So we did one on farming, just like on farming, and one of the next ones is like Law and Order in the Lowland Wastes, the setting, the sort of hex crawl area that's already out. But I think I try to write those vague enough where it's like regional, or like this is how it normally is, or these are some particular people that are having this experience, so that one of my Into the Odd is like, and I should say Electric Bastion Land is great, because it's just this like anything could possibly fit in here. if you're creative enough to make it work. And sometimes I think that can make the set. I think it works well in Electric Bastion Land because there's these spaces like the underground is like where you put your robots and your AI and your demons and stuff, technology and the I forget what it's called, the old world or the Outlands or whatever is where you put the cowboy stuff. And so there's these different spots for it. And that's something I tried to do with Cloud Empress was let other people's creativity have a space where they weren't going to feel like they were stepping on my toes, creating or expanding the world.
Well, I don't even know if we've given like hard opinions on hex crawls. I love them. They're great.
But I love a hex crawl. Yeah.
To me, I think what's really the most important is just like, exactly what you're talking about. It's just a broad stroke. Like I think Merkborg does a really good job of being like, this is a city name and here are the vibes of this area. And then go make stuff. And so it's really nice to just be like, this is the lowlands. This is the normal kind of people you might find there. This is the kind of stuff they do. And then that's it. Because as a forever GM, my favorite thing to do is to feel that myself. Like I would take like, if I had like a map of like a country, for example, like in a Cobalt Press will do it. And if they have like this city fully described and this city fully described and this city fully described, I'll be like, but that one's not described. So I have a name and it's around the kind of stuff I want. And now I can make it my own. So it's really great. I think if hex crawls are broad strokes and, then like dungeon crawls and stuff are really for like the fine painting. And I think you did a really good job of laying that out. And especially when you read, even before you get to the rule book, even just reading the lore book, you get these like really beautiful broad strokes through the early introduction stuff, even through like the character creation tables and stuff like that. You really do feel like you fill in those vibes more than like the specificity, which is really great. So,
and I think a lot of that comfort when I started my interest in tabletop role-playing games, it was 3.5, and it felt like if there wasn't a rule for something, like I couldn't do it. Like, how do I know what the monster is? And if I don't have a stat for it, like I can't, am I going to make my own monster? There was so much there already that it felt like anything I did was going to be wrong or like horribly broken. So I do think too, one of the sort of other goals was like, the mini adventures being like a one-shot kind of thing with like little prep, like, hey, just pop this open, there's a map, there's all your NPCs. It's not very prescriptive on what happens and how the players engage with it, but these kind of building in one-shots and campaign play is something I really tried to think about, and having these sort of little mini modules that would be in both the setting book and the year one adventure bundle. And the introductory adventure really being designed as a one shot, just because I know how busy people are and just how hard it is to get a group of human beings together multiple times. And also, again, with consumption, everyone's buying RPGs, right? So everyone has their system they want to play. So just creating experiences that would be self-contained and interesting within a short amount of time.
I mean, I really enjoy it. You definitely succeeded. It's I don't know. It's a great product. It's a great piece of content that you.
It's a great product
for us. So looking back on the Kickstarter, and now that Cloud Empress is for a lot of people in our hands, and then it's going to digitally start making its way to drive through and stuff. Is there anything that you think going back that you would change? Like if you could, based on like the resources and everything you had, knowing what you know now, would you have been like, oh, I wish I would have done X instead of Y? Or are you pretty much like good with the decisions you made along the way? Like ideally, like.
If one of the variables changed, right? Like if time changed or money changed or those kinds of things, like there's some space there that maybe I would make some different decisions. It was a lot to pack. So
did you have like a multiple rooms full of boxes? Because I mean, it was like you were like 20,000 items, right? It's like.
Yeah, I had like five or six full pallets in my basement, and then like 5 or 6 just full shelving units full of foldable boxes. So I think like one, I would have I would have quoted. I think the other thing is okay. So this is probably not what you're asking for, but I got some shipping numbers that I thought like that's a really good shipping rate. Like I don't know how they're going to do that, but that sounds great. I would not take that number anymore. Like I would just I think I'm going to use my estimates on shipping from now on. Like this is what I think based on the weight it'll reasonably ship at. The other thing that I'm trying to do in future projects, I've never had work like professionally edited before, and so I really understand the editing process in a way that I had just like no idea. I've had some friends that were editors in like the poetry world, and that's just really different than the TTRPG world. And so my expectations for editing and I also was not planning to be the graphic designer for any of this stuff. So that was like a couple like 3 or 4 weeks before the Kickstarter was supposed to go live. I lost my graphic designer for the project very suddenly, and so I had to recreate a lot of work that they did and all this stuff. So all that's to say, ideally, I'd like to have a pretty close to complete book done as I go into crowdfunding, again, to sort of minimize those risks. Again, that takes more resources, and that's one of the reasons I'm so grateful that the first project was a success. The work for the next campaign is well underway, and so I already have like a lot of the art assets done. I have all the graphic design templates ready. The writing's happening. So that's like one of the big things. Fulfillment is so complicated. And one of the things, as I mentioned earlier, one of the stress points was you don't sign contracts. At least I don't know many people that sign contracts with folks doing fulfillment or shipping. So it's a very like word of mouth industry. And when you finally invoice, yeah, that becomes sort of a contract. But folks' business models and prices change in 6 months, in 3 months. And so I think that's one of the big things. If I can get to a place where with a campaign, I'm quoting somebody's shipping rate and we're going to ship it in 3 months. I mean, that's really different than 9 months in terms of what could, what those prices could be, who I might be partnering with and working with and those kinds of things. So that's something just really front loading as much as possible. I think one thing it does lose is somebody like in the board game sphere that I look up to, like Leader Games, who you might be familiar with. They published Root and Oath and some really fantastic games, 𝗖𝗟𝗢𝗚. They really take a like participatory development route. Like they don't have it fully done, and they work sort of with audience feedback along the way. So I think that's one thing I lose a little bit of is that you sort of lock into your development path. I'm going on my gut and some early feedback for what we're doing for the next project, but it's not like I have a big chunk of reviews that I can sort of look at and listen to. But I think that for a number of reasons solidifies that positive backer experience and also makes it like just more I don't want to lose my house. Like I'm I have some business protections to that, but it's really scary to think that, like anything, I mean, I heard this about just applying for jobs. The most important thing we have is our name and our reputation. And so it's like every single time you go up for one of these projects, your entire reputation and future in the industry is at stake. And so that's a lot. So to minimize that as much as possible. And I know people, you can rebuild trust, and I know people, are forgiving of honest mistakes and problems that are unforeseen, but especially during the pandemic with a lot of these situations where people have to come back and ask for more money. I mean, that's just so, I understand why they do it. It just seems like such a horrible experience for everyone involved. And you get people saying like, they're blackmailing me for my game. And it just like, just what a bad situation to be in for everyone involved. So I think that's the big thing too. I do this because I'm passionate about the art I'm making, and I'm passionate about the community that I participate in. So I really try to, I don't want it to turn into like the worst experience of my life. So I think that's in summary, really front loading a little bit more of the campaign with some of my more, and I have more funds now to commission a lot of the artwork in advance. There was maybe 20 pieces of art that I still needed to do. And I think the added benefit is that I can sort of keep the art team like funded over a longer period of time, which is cool.
Yeah. I mean,
So you would change nothing, is what I'm getting.
yeah, nothing too big. You just learned a lot for the next one, is what it sounds like. I mean, it just sounds like you did just a fantastic job of managing this entire project, which is really great to see, because it turned it into something that's absolutely gorgeous. So,
yeah, I'm really happy with how it came out, and there's little things that really minor stuff that will. Really little stuff, but I have perfectionist tendencies, but I'm really happy with it, and I think ultimately there's sort of a beating heart to the game that I think I was able to keep, or we were able to bring together through the art, the graphic design, and people are like getting that. It was amazing to hear. There's an NPC in the setting book called 𝗖𝗟𝗢𝗘𝗦𝗦. Who's a I mean, he's a corpse that's become a sentient fungus being, and in our Discord, there are people like, I love 𝗖𝗟𝗢𝗦, and it felt like all these people, oh my gosh, 𝗖𝗟𝗢𝗦's my fave, and it was so cool. It felt like meeting somebody, like a coworker, knowing the same person at college. It's like, oh my gosh, I spent like 2 years with this character. I spent 1.5 years with this character. Like, them too. And that's the really cool thing about building setting books in particular is this like shared universe and this shared I don't know. And people like picking up on some of the stuff that I was trying. I don't know. It's just like, oh, you found this character endearing. Like, I found them very endearing as well. Like, that's awesome that we're having that shared experience. That stuff's really amazing to me.
Yeah, I was describing this to Ryan and somebody else. I was like, there's like this project has really great bones to it. Like there's this really amazing foundation of something like genuinely meaningful as like a table. Like, I'm very excited to sit down and actually play this with my table. If I could ever get 3 adults to sit down in the same room with me, 3 adults that live with me.
Yeah.
But very stoked for it, and for like future stuff.
Well, that's the thing is there's it's fantastic to see someone make something and then be like, yes, you're gonna get more, because like a lot of people make a lot of like games and then make another game and then make another game because they love making games, but it's really enjoyable, and we've seen it more lately where people make something fantastic and go, yes, like this is what I'm doing, you'll get more of this, I enjoy this is what you get. So the fact that we're getting more of it, so like what you talked a little bit about what's on the horizon, specifically, could you talk about like what's coming next?
Yeah, so again, with front loading in mind, I'm trying to let the pace of our work and what we can complete sort of dictate when that project will show up. But ideally, spring 2024, we'll have the next Kickstarter campaign. We'll be announcing. So now that people are getting, I find people find it obnoxious when you're announcing projects when not everyone has their games in hand. So we'll be doing more formal announcements over the next couple months. But there will be 2 new setting books, one called The Land of the Living and the other called The Land of the Dead. One is a overgrown spore garden setting, and the other is a ashen wasteland that we sort of teased and then had to remove from the original Kickstarter due to space. So that'll be making its appearance. So those are planned for spring with some additional like books. One of the things I don't know how it'll figure into the project, but Christian Meatcastle, who you've mentioned, kind of got me onto the idea of making the newsletter, releasing sort of an annual Cloud Empress newsletter publication. So all of the expansion content, the monthly expansion newsletter content, will show up in some form in some way. Yeah, there you go. So that's the idea with
mine's in the mail.
If you look at the newsletter, it's already sort of in layout. It's not perfect. We need to do proofreading and some other stuff. But designing these expansions 1 month at a time with the idea of, one of the things I'm really keen on is making the print experience the core of what I'm doing. So really trying to have things that are released digitally also come in to print because of the tactile experience and I think people like, I don't know, people like books. I like books. So
I really
that's
like
sort of
books.
the core experience.
I'm not a fan. I don't really like them that much.
So the other cool piece, and then there'll be this sort of introductory adventure I'm writing. So I don't know how that'll all come together into I don't know what pieces will go where and how the crowdfunding stuff has to come together for a like overall product and pledge level. But that's sort of the idea for spring of 2024. And again, I think I've shared in some places, it's frustrating and really enjoyable. I think I have like maybe 5 years of content sort of planned in different book forms, and there's some thoughtfulness. I'm trying not to do J.J. Abrams like mystery box on everything. So there's like a lot of if there is a mystery that you sort of pick up on, in many cases, I want to try to introduce maybe not the answer, but a space to play in those mysteries that are sort of pointed at in the current releases.
This might be too forward thinking because the project just came out.
Sure.
But do you have any like desire, or do you see any space for there to be like a Cloud Empress like second edition or whatever, where it expands upon itself within the rules?
Yes. I think I'm a future thinker, right? So what does Cloud Empress look like in 10 years is something I think about. Who knows what planet Earth will be like in 10 years. But
right.
I think that's what successful RPGs do. They update editions every, I don't know, 7-10 years, something like that. I think there needs to be a good reason for that. So I have thought about, I think Mothership is really the model that I'm working under. So Mothership started with a free rulebook, right? A free rulebook that you could get, and staple bound zines and that kind of stuff. So I'd love to see at some point like a box set. I don't know.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I think it's too weird to go into Target or like mass retail or something like that. But I'd love to see like a box set to try to capture a more new player friendly experience, and maybe there could be pre-gens and those kinds of things. One thing I am really keen on though, and really mindful of is, I am really frustrated when editions are too close together. So when somebody comes out with something, I really like it, and then I'll give you an example from the board game world. There's this new board game called Dune Uprising. So Dune Imperium is a really fun game. There's a bunch of expansions, and they released Dune Uprising, and it's sort of like people feel like it's a 1.52 edition for a game people have already spent a lot of money on. As time's coming out, it seems like it is more of a different gameplay experience, but I think it gets back to that like trust and thoughtfulness about where people's money goes. Like I don't want to be releasing something that I know is going to become obsolete in like 2 years, right? I mean, who knows what the future brings? But I'm always looking at like how to make play easier. And the other piece too is I know Sean McCoy and Tuesday Night Games, they have larger plans for like Mothership from what I understand, shaping that into be more of a setting that has some kind of semblance across products. I don't know what that will look like. I know they're talking about the Panic engine as a way to expand the D100 Panic system with their own lines and stuff like that. So I don't know if Cloud Empress will always be like Mothership. I don't know. TKG has the keys to some of the things that the brand, some of the like licensing is TKG related. And so I don't know how that'll all develop, and that could potentially necessitate some changes in terms of like what things are called or look like. Gotcha. So those are, I don't know. I think if a game is successful, I think one should plan on having future editions to improve content and But the other thing I'll say is maybe this is like, I don't know how this sounds, but one of the things I think about is like releasing a lot of books, like a ton of books, but then not having this expectation of keeping them in print forever. I think digitally making them available, but also just like exploring projects with a lot of different creators and not feeling the pressure to create like this product line that's like 50 books that I need to print every couple of years, right? So I think that's the other thing I think about is making a really wide product line and keeping, some books always in print that are sort of part of this core experience, but then maybe like print on demand or print at home or those kinds of things for some of the supplemental products that could be more seasonal or just sort of a one-time release thing that makes some of these crowdfunding campaigns a little bit more exciting.
Yeah, I love that stuff. I love when you find something that only had like 100 of them printed or something like that. Like there's like a feeling, I don't know, to me, I mean, I have a whole shelf of that stuff here, but like to me, it feels like I got like an artifact of the game, you know what I mean? Like, and it feels like a really important piece, when it's not something that I could just go to like Target and pick up or whatever. So I really love those kind of releases. So that would be really neat.
My whole thing is I just want more Cloud Empress. So
well, there you go. Well, and you talked about the free book too. Like, so what all of Cloud Empress is going to be free online, and kind of like what is we've kind of talked around it a bunch, but like why specifically have you decided to make the parts of it just available for anyone that you are?
The easy answer is that Mothership had a ton of success making their rulebook free. So that's like the first thing is me observing my peers who are a little bit down the road who have been really successful. The why do I think it's a good idea? It's not just an imitation. The first thing is existing in a world with piracy.
Mm-hmm.
The gameplay experience too, I think it's really helpful for having like players around the table all have a copy of this, whether that's a PDF, whether that's a print on your printer, whether that's buying a print copy, depending on what kind of experience you want to have. The other thing I think about is Cloud Empress is, I'm a queer creator. We have a lot of, the team is queer creators and marginalized folks. And so making a product that's financially accessible to everyone, but also trying to think about so not everything's free, right? But a lot of it, the introductory adventure and the rule book are free as a way to just make it accessible to a lot of different folks, felt important to me and not, RPGs are like luxury items. But they speak to experiences that are really vital to humanity, I think. And I think play is really vital to surviving the difficulties we face on an everyday basis and existentially as human beings. So I wouldn't want to like deprive that of folks if I can play some part in that. So I think that's I mean, and then I think the other piece just from, I always hate to go to this place too, but well, maybe it's not so negative. I mean, part of it is a financial decision in that Sean had me on his newsletter before the Kickstarter campaign went on, and we talked a little bit about how consoles will sell they'll lose $50 on a console because you're hopefully helping someone see the benefit or the joy of having this system in their lives. Or so I think they're called loss leaders. So that's the other piece too, is that someone might grab the book and then purchase some of the supplemental products if they want to support me, and try things out. I think the other piece too is my hope is I really want to help people create realistic expectations about what I'm doing so they can pop this open and see what it's like. And if the writing style, if the vibe is what they're looking for, if the rules are kind of there, then they might enjoy some of the other content. But if they don't like it, then they don't have to like invest their money in that, or participate in a crowdfunding campaign, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a good idea. When again, as someone who backs a ton of crowdfunding projects and also is in the space and all the social medias and stuff, a lot of the projects that I see really successful are ones that do put out stuff that you can see beforehand. You know, like if I know nothing about your game, I'm less likely, but if there's like a free quick start or a free rule book or an ash can or something like that, where I'm like, oh, this part intrigues me, that part intrigues me, like I'm definitely much more likely to you know, buy in on it. So I even just from like the financial standpoint, I think it makes so much sense to just be like, here is, you know, the rule book, but also here's like 8 adventures too, is a great piece. But even, yeah, like you said, it's basically like having a permanent community copies up that they do on itch. And it's really nice for those people that might not be able to afford it, but want to play it, but might be able to maybe afford one of the adventures later or this or that, to be able to have that access to it, which is fantastic. And it just feels like it fits into your corporate brand, to just be like a nice person who wants to have people have great experiences. So, you know, it's I don't know, all around, I don't know what to say besides a good job. Like, this is one of the most positive experiences with the Kickstarter that I've had.
Absolutely.
Including like how much I enjoy the game too, not just like all the like the back end stuff and like the production stuff. So I think you did an absolutely fantastic job, and I would definitely encourage people that want to do Kickstarters and projects to really look to Cloud Empress as like a good example of like what to strive for.
Yeah, and I mean, if there are folks out there who are thinking about crowdfunding something, I mean, reach out to me. I don't know. I don't know how much advice and help I can give, but I'm always happy to talk to other creators about the work they're doing. And yeah, I don't know. And there's a lot of free resources out there. Like I said, Jamie Stegmaier from Stonemaier Games really wrote the book on crowdfunding board games, and they're not doing crowdfunding campaigns anymore, but I think a lot of their resources are still very relevant.
So speaking of the free rule book, like where can people actually find like the rule book and any of the updates for like your stuff that's coming out and all the rest of that? Like where can people actually get Cloud Empress now or in the near future?
The easiest place to probably remember offhand is cloudempress.com. That has a collection of what books are out. It has digital resources. We're also, I'll just make a quick plug. For 4 more days, December 15th. Apologies if you're not listening to this, you know, if you're listening to this later, but we're doing one of the stretch goals from the project was to create a Cloud Empress Creators Grant. So we're giving away, you know, a moderately small amount of money, but money that I think would really help some creators create something in the Cloud Empress universe that they can then monetize or do whatever they want with. It's just sort of a fund to help support their labor or create, you know, purchase artwork, those kinds of things. So that information is on there, and that's something I'm hoping to do on a recurring basis, depending on future crowdfunding success. So cloudempress.com, all of the digital files, I think my current plan is that they'll be available on DriveThruRPG. Although if you buy the physical books from a number of, planning on retail dropping around January, February, ideally most of those will also come with the digital files as well. But if you're looking for something right now, the rulebook's free on DriveThruRPG, as well as the introductory adventure, and then you can purchase the setting book and the year 1 adventure bundle there.
Highly recommend.
Then,
I mean,
I guess the other piece is the Substack I mentioned, but you can subscribe. I'm on Substack, but you can also subscribe to my newsletter on the cloudempress.com website. But as I mentioned, I try to do like a 1 to 2 page spread every month with free expansion content, with artwork, and try to make it look pretty polished and exciting for folks.
I'm definitely excited for the future annual, because Christian did a fantastic job with this, and I can see why he really encouraged you to do one of your own. It's a cool little piece of bits and bobs, and it's nice to have something like that at the table. So
yeah, and there's so many newsletters right now, and you know, it's how do we make it worth your while to listen and to stay informed and those kinds of things. And I think it's cool for me, just people ask me questions. I got some questions, and there's a Cloud Empress Discord that I post about sometimes, or you can reach out to me if you'd like to be on it, where we develop the game a little bit further. But people are asking me all these questions about being a wanderling, which is the ghost. What happens when you die and you're a ghost? Like, it's just sort of a reference. And I thought, oh, well, maybe people want a little bit more there. So I wrote a 2-page expansion on that for how to be a ghost.
Nice.
So stuff like that is ways to fill in the gaps or questions that I didn't have. A lot of what these books are really defined by, I mean, they're both at this rule book and the setting book are both at their 60-page limit for the printer. So there's a lot I couldn't fit in there that I get to play around with in the newsletter.
Very cool.
Yeah, very cool. Again, we're just more excited for more, and we've talked about this a bunch. We are going to be reviewing Cloud Empress in January, so you'll get more Cloud Empress here on the show. Running it again, awesome. It's a fun game. It'll probably be the game we cover, like we said, probably the game we covered the most since the beginning of the show. By the time we finish, so it's really great. Quick giveaway winner. We're gonna pick that, and it's Odds and Ends. Yeah, Odds and Ends. I think a late addition to the giveaway here. Do me a solid. Either shoot us a message on Discord or whisper me your how to mail stuff to you, and we'll get that sent out to you. But Watt, thank you so much for coming on. Yeah, it was fantastic to hear. Yeah, not just about Cloud Empress too, but honestly, just like the back end of Kickstarter, you had so much insight into the way the project went.
Really interesting. This is a really great talk.
I'm new to this all, and so I hope I haven't steered anyone in the wrong direction, but those are just kind of the guiding principles I brought to this first campaign, and I'm hoping they don't all prove to be like treacherous false decisions or wrong ends for the next one. Oh no, actually that's horrible. Don't do it that way.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see, and next time something comes out, I'm sure we'll talk about that as well. But
awesome.
Again, seriously, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And thank you everyone in chat for being here as well. We will try to make sure we get this episode out in time so that we can hear about the creator grant or get some people that might not have heard about that, and which is also fantastic, by the way. That's so cool that you're doing that. But yeah, that is our episode for tonight. Once again, thank you for being here, and we will talk to you all later. Bye.